Welcome everybody who's on our Zoom call today for what I think will be just a marvelous seminar by Professor Mark Chignell. My name is Marcus Bussman. I'm privileged to be the chair of our Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering here at the U of T. And it's my privilege to introduce Mark to you today. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. One is that we are recording this session. We will want to share this with others, and so keep that in mind. And at the end of the intro, I'll just say a couple of words about how we're going to interact with Mark after the presentation. So just a little bit about Mark. So Mark has, I actually thought I had to do a little research on Mark, to be honest, but I think it's very cool that Mark is in a Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering, but holds a PhD in psychology from the University of Canterbury in New Zealand from a few years ago, if I can say that. He came to the US, he went to Ohio State and earned I think a master's degree there. And that's when he moved into systems and industrial engineering. He worked at the University of Southern California for a few years before he came north in 1990 and joined what then was, I think, the Department of Industrial Engineering at the U of T. It became MIE later. So Mark is a member of our human factors group within industrial engineering here on the industrial engineering side of our department. And just in a word or two, you know, the work that Mark does now is in thinking about how to apply new technologies, machine learning and AI and user interface design to what I think are really important healthcare issues, including, as he'll speak about today, how to keep the elderly among us active and engaged. So Mark has, you know, so I said 1990, so Mark has been a prof for about 30 years here at the U of T. His research has been well funded by provincial and federal granting agencies and by a variety of well-known tech companies. And I think it's really noteworthy, and he will talk about this, that Mark is also an entrepreneur and so has started a couple of companies, including most recently a company related to this age-related research, a company called Centivizer that we'll hear more about. And so before I turn it over, just a couple of things. If, as you're listening to Mark, you have questions for him, we're going to set aside a few minutes at the end before 1 o'clock to have him answer a few of those. And so pop those questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And the other comment I'll make is that after 1 o'clock, when we're done, some of us, including Mark and I and Shannon and others, will be heading over to a different app called GatherTown, which is a place where we can network and talk more informally. And so Shannon will give us more information on that at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Professor Mark Chignell.
Thank you very much, Professor Bussman. So I'm just going to share my screen and launch straight into it here, if I can figure out the technology. I'm always amused when younger people watch me trying to use technology and constantly, I think, making comments to themselves, but politely not saying what they're thinking, which is fine by me. So we're going to talk about the topic of making aging fun. And my personal confession is I am now a senior. I turned 65 in June. So, you know, you think it's never going to happen to you, and then here we are. So I'm interested in this problem, and I've had the privilege to be a professor on the industrial engineering side of MIE now for 31 years. And I've also had the privilege to do some startups, and this latest one, Centivizer, has been around since 2016, but it's really still sort of nestled inside the university, and we're hoping to sort of reach launch fairly soon. I would like to thank not only the MIE department, but also AgeWell for funding and supporting this research, and it's been done as part of my lab as well as with the startup. Okay, so the thing about aging is it generates disabilities, and these accumulate with time. And anyone who gets to my age probably starts to be able to tell the weather, you know, based on how their knees feel. You get things like rheumatism, arthritis, accumulated sports injuries, strokes and congestive heart failure. Men my age often go out and start working out at fitness centers and pull muscles, trying to be younger than they really are. And then we have a death and disconnection of brain tissue, eye injuries, sun exposure, and different bodies break in different ways. But we shouldn't define people in terms of their disabilities, whether it be for ourselves or for others. So this is all about dealing with what would otherwise be a problem. And I'm serious. You know, aging should be fun. It should be, in some ways, some of the most rewarding part of your life. You finally figured out what's going on. You have a certain amount of wisdom. You've learned not to listen to people all the time, just when they tell you stuff. You've learned to, you know, think a little bit more for yourselves and be a little bit more skeptical about things. So the problem is that having an increase in aging populations at the societal level. We've got a functional decline with aging. We've got increasing healthcare costs. We've got caregiver burnout, and we've got a lot of lonely and bored people out there. So there should be a way for engineers to help with these kinds of problems. So let's think about the styles of aging first of all. So if you look around, you know, we've got a kind of quadrant here, 4 quadrants, and on the top right is where we want to be, and that's fully functioned, both physically and cognitively. And I suppose that Nelson Mandela was an example of someone who got to a fairly good old age, being strong physically and cognitively. And on the other end, you know, you've got advanced dementia, where someone is both physically and cognitively frail, and this is where none of us want to be. And then on the top left, we have someone like Stephen Hawking, who kept his mind very well, but was physically frail due to a disease. And we have someone like Ronald Reagan, who was physically pretty strong, but developed dementia. Okay, so as we age, specific things tend to decline, and these include things like memory, insight, ability to plan, information processing, reasoning and learning, and so on. And this looks like a pretty damning list. It's like, wow, you know, a lot of the things that we think of as being human are drifting out the door. And obviously, you know, anything we can do to slow down this loss would be beneficial. So the reason why this is happening actually is that our brains are shrinking. And I don't think people generally realize this, but there is, you know, from a relatively early age, you know, after about 25, things start going downhill. And, you know, later on, the brain just starts getting smaller, loses mass. And this is a natural process, you know, maybe 1 or 2% a year by the time you get to a certain age. But in abnormal aging, it goes down faster. So on the left there, we see a healthy brain. This is a slice through a brain. The sort of darker pink is the gray matter. The lighter pink is the white matter. And the white matter is actually just transport neurons. So all of this material is neurons, which are electrical signaling units within the brain. But the white matter is myelinated neurons that are designed for transport, and they send messages from, you know, one part of a brain to another. So you can think of the gray matter as like the cities and towns, and the white matter as the highways in the brain. And the problems with aging and the brain relate to both loss of gray matter and loss of white matter. Some people think that the loss of white matter and the disconnectivity that results is even more important than the loss of gray matter. And you'll see that in mild Alzheimer's disease, you know, the ventricles, the parts of the brain where the cerebrospinal fluid are expanding, and the parts that contain the brain tissue are contracting. And one of the areas that's contracting in the middle there is the hippocampus, which is very important because it's where we form new memories. So one of the things that gets hit early in aging, and particularly in dementia, is memory. And this is because the areas associated with memory are starting to shrink. And in severe Alzheimer's disease, you can get a very shrunken brain. And on the lower left there, you'll see an image of somebody with severe Alzheimer's disease, post-mortem obviously, because this is a cross-section of a brain. And you'll see how different it looks from a healthy brain. And on the right, you'll see 2 scans. And the left scan shows the kind of activity that normally occurs in the brain, and the right scan shows someone with very little activity. So there's less going on. It's as if the lights are turning out inside the brain. Okay, so I don't think of Alzheimer's disease as a disease. I think of it as a machine shrinking and breaking down. And it can do that for many reasons. So it's obvious that people can still enjoy. So if we look at all those things that went, one of the things that stays is the party side of the brain, right? So that sounds nice. You know, every day could be Saturday night, you know, for a person with dementia or a person with a lot of cognitive decline, because reward seeking, sensing, and learn skills can all stay. The problem, of course, is you need other people to sort of like maintain your lifestyle and to play the music for you and so on. So it's harder to get that enjoyment experience, you know, in cases where you can't look after yourself and control your lifestyle. Okay, the other thing I would say is that people, you know, with dementia, they tend to not only lose their memory, but they lose their ability to plan for the future. So it's almost like a Zen meditative experience where all you can do is live in the present. So, you know, there are some interesting, you know, potential advantages for loss of cognitive function, but we would have to be more careful in how we design the world to take advantage of those benefits. Okay, so ideally, you know, if we're not trying to dance, you know, our shrunken brains away, you know, and having everybody looking after us to give us our Saturday night experience, then we're going to have to maintain function. So this is the game. As we get older, we want to stay independent. You know, we don't want to go into assisted living or long-term care if we can help it. And the ideal is to have both physical and cognitive exercise. So for a long time, people thought that physical exercise would benefit you physically and cognitive exercise would benefit you cognitively. But the recent research has shown that physical exercise gives much more of a benefit to cognitive performance. And cognitive exercises generally only train for the specific tasks that are being used. So if you're doing Sudoku, you get very good at Sudoku, but it doesn't mean that you have generally better cognitive function. You know, probably you're better off learning a new language or a new musical instrument than trying to do specific brain training games. But on the other hand, the physical exercise is very beneficial because when you think about it, the blood circulation system goes through both the body and the brain and is used to deliver nutrients and oxygen. So if you have compromised metabolism, this will have a brain effect as well as a body effect. And you know, I would use the analogy of, you know, someone you know, making a mess in a swimming pool. You know, it doesn't take long for things to diffuse over to the other side. So it's not like, okay, I'll let the young kids play on one side of the pool and I'll have this nice clean you know, other side of the pool. That's not how it works. And although we know what's good now, and lifestyle is so important, and some researchers currently estimate that around about 35% of dementia is due to lifestyle issues. So it's not purely a genetic function anymore. But in reality, willpower is hard. So we have cruises, buffets, couches, snacks, TV, light reading, and we also tend to rely on medicine, and pretty soon we get used to the idea that whenever we have a pain, we have to medicate. So the things that would help us, you know, be stronger are not necessarily the things we end up engaging in doing. So the idea that kind of motivates my research is a simple little pseudo equation that activation plus reward equals engagement. And if we have engagement, then we're going to have adherence to activation, adherence to physical exercise, and this will be beneficial. So we have to take the capacity to enjoy, to learn, and the wish to act and do, and translate it into meaningful activities that can make the person stronger and smarter, or at least reduce the cognitive decline that otherwise occurs. So the idea is if we have increased activation, we should have less decline. So what we started off doing with our Centivizer approach is using rewarded activities to motivate people to exercise, and thereby increase both their physical and cognitive activity, and provide personalized exercises that were enjoyable to perform and beneficial. So this was our general strategy in coming up with the technologies that we did. So we wanted to use activation technology to bring health and joy to the elderly. And these technologies should be entertaining, user-centered, multifaceted, and engaging. So things started off in the ancient days about 5.5 years ago in February 2016 when I was asked to be a judge at a hackathon in Edmonton. So I flew into Edmonton, and when I arrived, I was told that, oh no, they didn't want me to be a judge, they would like me to be a competitor. So I had this kind of meet and greet in an auditorium, and I was pitching a project, and then 4 students came and worked with me, and we worked for the whole weekend, and it was one of the most enjoyable weekends I've ever had. It was right up there with dog sledding in Lapland. And we came up with the Centivizer concept then. And it really has been pretty much the same thing going all the way through, but developing much more detail and learning a lot of lessons. So here we see a few months later, we developed a prototype, and this is a wooden box. And on the right here, I'll just show you with the cursor, we have a coin dispenser. It's a tube with nickels in it, and every time the person hits the mole in the whack-a-mole game you can't see here, then a coin spits out the bottom. Okay, so we have this idea of reward. Now, I took this to a long-term care home and told them about it, and I was told that this was degrading and did not show sufficient dignity for people. But I didn't say it, but I felt like saying, you have people, walking around with adult diapers here, and we're trying to give them something that can improve their function, and you're talking to me about dignity. So there is this this kind of resistance to certain kinds of change, especially if it's to do with behavioral reinforcement and giving people this kind of enjoyable rewards for doing things. This is the old logo we used to have, the Centivizer logo. I was told it looked like an old jazz bar, so I had to change it. So now we have a much more modern logo. And the lady here is a recreational therapist who's helped us a lot. This is Brian, my postdoc, who's been with me since the beginning. And this is Thomas, who developed the coin dispenser. He's a mechanical engineer, and he's now working at a company called NIME doing user experience work. Okay, so we did a lot of work meeting with stakeholders and trying to understand the needs. And here we have two meetings from the fall of 2016. One was in the Faculty of Information. The dean there kindly allowed us to use the space and gave an opening address. And the second one is from Midland, Ontario, the Cultural Arts Centres there, where we teamed up with Ambient Activity Technology, who's an industry partner for us. And we did a joint presentation there. There were quite a few more. So this was a way to try and understand the problem as stakeholders saw it. So here's a new box that we developed. We also had some over-the-shoulder exercises that we did, which I won't show here, but this is an example of a box which is used for a driving simulation and for exploring the world. The driving simulation was requested by an occupational therapist in the specialized dementia unit at Toronto Rehab. So we get a lot of ideas from other people. So we duly went ahead and started building this. And this box was created for us by the industry partner Ambient Activity Technology, because they're basically a woodworking company traditionally. They started out with children's play equipment, and now they've moved into play equipment for old people. And this driving simulator allowed people to go on a road trip. They could also travel the world with immersive 360-degree videos, and they could ride a virtual bicycle. So this was our model of the world, and you'll notice these foot pedals here. In the early days, maybe this would have been about 3 or perhaps 4 years ago. And here's me using the steering wheel. In this case, I'm doing a shopping. So I'm simulated driving around different islands, and each island has a different function on it. So in shopping, you have street signs, and you go left or right, depending on what's on your shopping list and where the shops are. Driving down memory lane, you might drive past Elvis, and if you stop, he'll sing to you. Or you might go past a Looney Tunes character. So we had a really nice kind of system there. The trouble was that it was very hard to design the steering wheel so that people with dementia could use it accurately, and it was a constant problem for us. We went through many different models, and the simulation, it's just so hard to develop a really good simulation that does everything you want it to do, and it's like a never-ending task. So in the end, we moved away from this just because it had too many challenges for us. So we wanted to put the person, the reality is a lot of the funding out there is for people with dementia. So I'm interested in healthy aging, and ultimately I would like to support people aging in place in their homes. But a lot of our research has been on people with dementia because that's allowed us to get the funding we need to keep going. So when you're developing these serious games for dementia, the play context is important, the game genre is important, but also the health outcomes you're shooting for. The adaptability of the game mechanism and the interaction style. So we want to make sure that this is all focused on the person and what they need. So we ended up a few years ago taking 2 streams. So one stream looked at cognitive assessment, and this was based on research I'd actually started a couple of years before 2016 working with Dr. Jacques Lee, who's now at the Schwartz-Reisman Institute. And we were looking at screening for dementia in the emergency room. So we developed these whack-a-mole games around about 2014, and we showed that they could be used for the screening purpose. And we have a couple of papers on this. So that was the cognitive assessment side of things, where we were using these whack-a-mole games to assess different cognitive functions. We also had physical activity. And once we decided that physical activity was where we wanted to be, and we wanted to get people doing more physical activity, then we started developing systems. Eventually they have become what we are now calling To Race With Me and Forever Young. And these are different applications that we hope to sell as products, probably starting next year. So this is the idea with these Tag Me games that we're developing, target acquisition games for measurement and evaluation. We have these different games, and the person can choose, or else they can be taken through in a specific order. We're motivated by, obviously, the wonderful whack-a-mole game. This is just an example of someone who's really into whack-a-mole. And if you've ever been at the CNE and you've seen these kind of whack-a-mole games, you'll know, I mean, there can be sharks popping up or crocodiles, but people get really into this thing. So whack-a-mole is a very interesting model. So here we see an example of a whack-a-mole game, and we have to hit the mole and avoid the butterfly. This is an example of a response inhibition game. The tablet form factor is easy to use. We were using that in the emergency room in the hospital. It can be self-administered. The data can be recorded automatically, and we can measure a variety of executive functions, and we can also then track and monitor data over time on a website and allow people to keep a sense of what's going on. My dream would be that everyone going into a hospital visit would have their cognitive status measured before and after. And if for any reason, there's a drug administration or other event that causes a person to decline significantly, then we would know about it, so that the medical system could avoid it in future, or potentially could even compensate the person for the loss of cognitive function. So right now, the medical system gets a free ride. And while we know a lot about the vital signs, we know very little about what happens. And generally, it's assumed that when an elderly person goes into hospital, if they show signs of cognitive problems, it's because of that's the way they were, because people don't know the baseline cognitive status. Okay, now here you'll see we start off with 15 holes, and we boiled this down to I think it's now a 3x2 arrangement that we've been focusing on. But we learned a lot of lessons as we went along. So here's BrainTagger, and this picture is taken from a session we had in Wychwood Public Library near Yonge and St. Clair a couple of years ago, before the pandemic. So we were doing a lot of work with the Toronto Public Library, and we were planning to set up technology in senior spaces within a renovated public library, but that's been kind of put on hold for a couple of years because of the pandemic, and we're hoping to get back to that. Okay, so the goal with BrainTagger was to create a validated system for monitoring cognitive functioning, to make cognitive assessment more engaging, inexpensive, and accessible everywhere. I had this dream of having a ubiquitous cognitive assessment that people would go through, and we would check and see if there's any threats to their cognitive status, whether it be from using sedatives, drugs, drinking, whatever it is, right? So people would understand the cost of any lifestyle or other problems that are threatening their future cognitive functioning. And we want to detect and mitigate abnormal cognitive decline. Okay, so here's a video on, and I'm going to break out of the full screen for a second and hope that this doesn't create a problem for me. I don't want to stop sharing. I just want to get out of here. Okay, so I'm just going to go over to Safari, and in this case, and play a video, and I have to find the right one. Okay, so I'm going to play BrainTagger. This is just 30 seconds, so it's a very quick video we did. This was done for a CHI conference.
BrainTagger provides an entertaining way to track and assess cognitive function over time. The BrainTagger is an app that can be downloaded onto any tablet and used with or without the button box shown here. It currently contains 8 games that measure different cognitive abilities that can be tracked over time, such as cognitive speed, response inhibition, and lexical access. For more information, visit our website or reach out via email to work together.
Okay, so that's the first video, and we'll come back to more later. And if I was smart, I'd do this more quickly. But there you are. I haven't been playing my own games enough. Okay, so we're back here, and these are just some of the versions of BrainTagger that we have at the moment. As you can see, I'll just get rid of this. So we've been working with Professor J. Bruce Moncton at Western Ontario. He's a neuroscientist and has been helping us develop these BrainTagger games to measure different executive functions. These games are being used by researchers in different countries, including Japan, China, and also in other parts of Canada. And one of the things they've been looking at is abnormal development of executive functions in children. So it's not just for all people. Okay, so these are some of the example types of game. So in terms of validation results, we've had a string of scientific publications on this stuff. And one example is our game for measuring cognitive speed shows a good correlation with standard assessments for the elderly, such as the mini mental state examination, the Montreal cognitive assessment, and the confusion assessment method, which is used for delirium screening or delirium detection. So there's a lot of promise with these games, and the thing about games is, they have more ecological validity. The person is doing them for a reason. They're more motivated to perform, whereas paper and pencil tests are boring, hard to administer, and so on. Incidentally, the box you see on the right here was from Dollarama. It cost us $4. So initially, we developed these boxes, for our early models of button box, and then now we use vacuum molding to do the boxes. And eventually, when we get enough volume, we'll probably do injection molding. But this is just part of the learning experience for this kind of product. Over here, we did an experiment which was published in Applied Neuropsychology Adult, where we compared our response inhibition game with the gold standard psychological task, which is the go-no-go task. And we found up to a correlation of about 0.7 when we were combining both speed and accuracy in the comparison. Okay, and you'll just see here that the way the game works is you have a mole and you have a mole with a hat. You have to hit the mole, but not the mole with a hat. In general, for these target acquisition games, the way we do it is the cognitive task is like a satellite, and the rocket is a whack-a-mole game, and the payload on the rocket or the satellite is the cognitive operation you have to make in deciding what to hit, what's a target and what's a distractor. In this case, it's response inhibition because there's only a few distractors. You're trying to hit these moles as fast as possible, and you have to sort of withdraw your hand and stop hitting if you see a mole with a hat. Okay, here's some other validation results, just showing that we're comparing against a variety of measures in an emergency room setting. This is just, we've also done studies looking at whether it's better to use similar or dissimilar distractors. Generally, it doesn't make that much difference. It just seems that they have to be different. This is another type of pilot study that we carry out as part of our game development. This is looking at what the character appearance speed should be. And what this graph shows is that response time tends to asymptote. So once you get to about 800 milliseconds, you don't have any advantage, and you don't see, correspondingly, you don't see improvements in accuracy. So it seems like the speeded part of the task only goes up to about 800 milliseconds, and then after that, it flattens off. So, but for older people, this is for young adults. For older people, we might find this curve is a little bit, flattens off a little bit later. So there's a lot of subtleties in how you develop these technologies and make them work. This is a FMRI image from the Brain Institute at Western University, and it's just showing inside the brain what's happening when someone's playing our games. So in this case, we had 10 people go through the fMRI or the brain scanner, and then COVID came along. So that project's been on hold, but we're very, very keen to validate some of what we're doing with brain scans. Just to show you, it doesn't have to be moles, and you can have different skins. So in this example, we're watering flowers and trying not to water weeds. And if you water weeds, then they start growing. if you don't water the flowers, they start shriveling up. So you can create a kind of increasing motivation for people. And you can do the same thing for fishing and cooking and so on. So the game framework is actually very flexible, and it's all about target acquisition, and it doesn't have to be just moles. Okay, another idea is that we can use the appearance of game characters as a motivation. In some games, people can add clothing and so on, and there's in-store purchases or in-game purchases. I'm not imagining that, but we can see that as people level up, then we see that they, become Super Saiyan or whatever, right? So there's all kinds of ways in which we can use gamification to improve the experience and the motivation. We've done studies with word finding. So we're working with neuropsychologist Jed Meltzer from the Rotman Institute at Bakerest Hospital, and also the Department of Psychology at U of T. And they're working with this PhD student. We've developed a game called Tag Me Coda, which basically sort of is a test of distraction and word fluency. And what we found there is that when we gave the motivation of coins, so the person was earning coins, these are meaningless coins, there was no actual dollar value associated with them, but when they were using these coins, they went faster. And when we took the coins away, they responded as if they were doing the standard laboratory task. So this is a concept called gamified psychometrics that I'm also very interested in. So it's not just a matter of cognitive assessment. We're actually thinking that our game approach could be used for running psychological experiments. In fact, I've yet to find a psychological experiment that people are running that can't be gamified in this way. And I'm still waiting for someone to show me something that we can't actually do. I'm sure it'll happen. Maybe somebody will tell me one here. But anyway, but it certainly covers a lot of ground. Okay, so we know there's a need for exercise. There's a ton of data out there. This is just some New Zealand data. And what you see here is that lifestyle-related diseases increase with age, whether it be stroke, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, chronic pain, arthritis. So all of these things are getting worse with age. So, and presumably all of these things would be better if we had more physical exercise. That's my insertion anyway. On the other hand, the time spent thinking and relaxing just goes way, way up. So, everybody thinks, in the old days, I remember, people would retire, and the idea was that you would, in New Zealand in the 1970s or 60s, you would retire at 65, you'd be dead at 70, right? So you wouldn't have too long to spend your golden years. So the idea of relaxing after a hard life work seemed reasonable. And but these days we have much more extended expectation of life after retirement. And so, active retirement becomes a challenge. And, relaxing and thinking is probably not a good way for the brain to be, or the body for that matter. So the American Time Usage Survey findings, this is a study that I did a while ago, show that there's an increased lack of physical activation as people get older. There's an urgent need to increase physical exercise, and there's generally too much time wasting. And there needs to be a greater engagement in activities. Similar studies like this have also been carried out in long-term care, showing that people just don't have enough things to do during the day. Okay, so we came across the idea of pedal exercise a few years ago and really got into it, but there's a history behind this. So there was a game called Paper Dude, some of you may know, from quite a few years ago, and this was a virtual reality sort of cycling game where you would deliver newspapers. On the right, there's a really cool game that makes me think for Navy type applications that we're working on now, where you have pedal tanks. And the idea is the faster you pedal, the faster your tank goes. So obviously you get an advantage in the game if you exercise more. So this was a research paper from a few years ago, but probably we need more of this kind of thing. On the left, a simple prototype we put together a few years ago. This was with Enrique Matulis, did this one, where as you pedal, you can make a face smile. And if you don't pedal, it goes back to frowning. And finally, on the right here, this was a shot of an installation we did at Toronto Public Library, where we see a split screen and two people are competing against each other over a video racing course. The faster they pedal, the faster they go around the course. Okay, so this is an early version of what we call the experiential Centivizer that we were testing a couple of years ago. And what you'll see here is that the person is waiting outside a shop to give you, I'm not sure what that is, maybe it's some eggs or some milk. Anyway, and they say hi to you, right? So you have a social experience. So you're driving around, you're getting social experiences. So this was a thing that we had. And our mission was to, unleash the potential of technology for healthy and active living. And so anyway, this was our pitch. But you'll notice here that we're just using foot pedals, very simple foot pedals. So what happened was we tried this out. This is at York Care Centre in Fredericton. And the first person they tried it with was a lady who had lost her legs. And she was having a great deal of trouble reaching things. So for her, it wasn't possible. She couldn't use the hand pedals. And when we tried putting the hand pedals on the table, it was too hard to reach. So clearly we need to think more about having both hand and foot pedals, because a lot of people don't necessarily have good mobility with their feet. So I'm going to show you now a quick video of our two race with me system. This is a 1-minute video. So here goes. Okay, so.
Both physical activity and social engagement have been shown to improve cognitive ability and increase the quality of life for older adults. Currently, long-term care homes just don't have enough staff to be able to engage all residents as frequently as they need to be. To Race With Me can be used in many ways. Residents can use the product alone and pedal through
Mark, I will
courses
say
to
that we
beat their
can't
best
see the
time.
video on the screen.
Or
Oh, you can't see it. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mark.
alongside with them
Oh my
using the
God.
split screen function.
Yeah. So it's funny, you can't see the screen, but you could see my slides.
We've been seeing your slides the whole time, but just this last video, we're not seeing it on the screen.
That's so
we can hear,
weird.
Can't see it.
I will try again. I'm sorry, because I really wanted to show it to you. Maybe. Oh, let me see what I can do here. Technical problems. So I'm sharing my screen.
Try sharing again. I don't think we're getting any share from you right now at all.
Okay. How about now?
Oh, now we're
yes.
seeing it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I apologize for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for making me aware of it. So this is us using To Race With Me. This is Mark Canick, who's the owner of Ambient Activity Technology and a business partner on this
The video
project.
content features 100 scenic courses from a wide range of locations and settings. In addition, To Race With Me is equipped with video chatting functionality that allows users to remotely compete with friends, family, or volunteers located anywhere. To Race With Me also connects with the Centivizer dashboard to allow users to track their progress.
Okay, so that's To Race With Me, and one of the things I'll just mention is that we had 100 videos, and I thought it'd be more than enough. We licensed them from a content provider, and we found that just in a couple of months, people have gone through them all and they want more videos. So we've been out shooting more videos. It's become a real issue for us. What I'll do now is I'll just quickly show you a video that I'm not allowed to show you, just for a few seconds. You can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is just a testimonial from a lady.
When I had my stroke 2.5 years ago, it left me paralyzed on my left side. Prior to that.
Okay, so she used to like walking around. Now she's paralyzed on her left side.
And it caused my hands go numb every night. But since I started with the program, my hand's not numb anymore in the mornings. And it's helping my shoulder, which was really sore. It's helping that a lot too. I use the foot pedals on them, starting to move my left leg a little bit. So I'm hoping one of these days I'll be able to get up and walk.
Okay, so that blew me away when I saw this. I apologize. This is not what we want. Okay, so I actually went out a few weeks ago and met that lady in Fredericton, and it was great to see her and to see her experience. And there were about 10 people who were using our equipment in Fredericton, and they were uniformly very happy. I was very surprised, frankly, because of course when you make something, you understand all the weaknesses and compromises that have been made. But I think that exercise, this kind of equipment is a forcing function, and what it does is give people a framework for exercise, and it helps give a structure so that the people in the care home expect exercise, and every day the person comes down and does the exercise in a way that would be hard to do if it was more like physiotherapy and they were just sitting in a chair and being told to move their legs. So this kind of equipment, I'm confident now that it works. Okay, so I'll get back to the slides. Stop this. Okay. Okay, so we are currently evaluating To Race With Me. We're doing user testing at Edgewater Gardens with Judy and Neil, who you saw earlier in one of the earlier Centivizer models where we had the coin dispenser. We're also doing field trials at York Care Centre in Fredericton, and Ellen, the lady you just saw, is one of the people in that trial. We're just starting a trial at the Humber River Hospital Church Reactivation Centre. We're starting a trial at the Seniors Health Centre with North York General Hospital. We're about to start a trial at the Shannex Faubourg du Mascaret in Moncton. And we're also doing a study with VHA home healthcare, which allows us to get into aging in place types of settings. And we actually sold a set of 10 To Race Me units to Yihong Geriatric Healthcare, but that was a sort of special one, and we're probably not going to do too many more sales until next year. Okay, so we believe that there are many different contexts of use for this kind of technology, and community dwelling seniors are a big focus. So they could experience this in libraries, for instance. Obviously, rehab hospitals, and the experience of Ellen shows that this kind of equipment can be used in rehab. Also, reactivation centers where patients are waiting for discharge or are trying to go to alternate levels of care. And then finally, residents in long-term care, which is currently the main focus. So here's an example of our sessions in Toronto Public Library. We had 4 sessions in the fall of 2019. I thought they were very successful, and we'll do more once it's deemed to be possible. So To Race With Me is a novel approach to activating people with technology. It uses extrinsic motivators such as video content and social interaction. It has both hand and foot pedals. It has a large screen for an immersive experience. We use face recognition login for multi-user settings. This has been a challenge for us because we're using deep learning, and the Raspberry Pi computers that we're using are inexpensive, but they tend to overheat. So we've been overclocking them and then using special cooling fans and heat sinks. But we're now moving to a more powerful computer, Seed Studio Odyssey, so that should address that issue. And we use a simple push button interface, and we use a dashboard for monitoring progress. And one of the things we really want to do is improve communication with family, because family tend to become disengaged when someone goes into long-term care. They feel guilty, and they need high-quality communications that require low effort. So one idea we have is to use our face recognition software to recognize when a person looks happy, and then send a few seconds of video as a video snapshot to the family, so it gives them some sense of how the person is doing. We also are creating a tool where through the smartphone, family members can send audio and video messages and photos, which can then be played in addition to the regular videos in our system. And finally, a sort of killer app is one where as soon as a person gets on and start using the equipment, a text message gets sent with a link to the family member's phone. If they click on it, then they can launch a video conference. So it's one of these things where the advantages are that it hasn't have to be scheduled. The person's not really aware of what's happening, so they don't feel rejected if the family member's not there. The family member can choose when they want to interact and know that the person's available for them. And there's a natural topic of conversation based on the video course, that the person is going with and their exercise. So we think it kind of really makes a nice little social interaction package as well. Okay, so we've got the social interaction motivating exercise and the shared experience making communication easier. The exercise units double as communication units, and we can thereby improve physical fitness, reduce isolation, and create better connection to family. There's one more product that we've been working with, and this is a bit of a sad story. This was the original sale to Yihong, and then what happened was right at the very last minute, after I'd bought all the VR headsets and was about to send it to them, they said, well, you know what, we're worried about infection control. We'd rather have To Race With Me. So this is something that is kind of out there, but not yet being used. We call it Forever Young, and I've played with this, and I think it's a really fun experience, but I will see if I can show you the video if I can find it. Okay, I can't find it. Okay, so one more try before we give up here. This is Forever Young. So can you see my screen? Can someone tell me?
That's right.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Many studies have shown that physical activity can help to prevent cognitive decline, especially in patients with dementia. However, motivating older adults to be active and providing them with a method to do so where they can be safely monitored is a challenge. Forever Young provides 3D immersive videos to motivate older adults to pedal through the course using their hands or feet. The user is fully immersed in a 3D experience using the virtual reality headset. By turning their head from side to side, they can take in their surroundings. The speed that they pedal controls the speed of the video, giving the user control to slow down and enjoy their surroundings when they choose to. Forever Young comes with access to the Centivizer dashboard.
Okay, so that's another one that we do as well. Again, I got to get back. Give me a second. Okay, back to the presentation. So where to next? We plan to sort of launch our products in 2022, including a freemium version of BrainTagger. So the idea is it's free to use, but we would charge a 5-month subscription for people who wanted to use the web dashboard to get more detailed information, to look at trends over time, and to have our reporting features. We're trying to develop norms so that we can tell you how well people are doing, compared to other people in long-term care, compared to people the same age, and so on. Okay, so I'm about 2 minutes earlier than I planned to be, which I think is good. And I'd like to acknowledge, there's so many people, I haven't really thanked all the people, but I'm largely a manager and everybody else does the work in this project. I'd like to thank all the people who are helping put Centivizer together. I'd like to thank the MIE department being such a great place to work and do research. Also, the U of T work study program has helped us a lot. And MITAX, AgeWell, Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, the New Brunswick's Healthy Seniors Pilot Project, it just goes on, and Ambient Activity, who really helped us. And we still have about 160 pedals units up in Midland that we store with them. Okay, so I'll stop there and I guess hand it back. Thank you.
Well, so that was a marvelous presentation, Mark. Thank you. I really learned a lot, and I have a mom who's 91 and she's in a retirement home, but it's connected to a long-term care home, and she's certainly a lot of what you said. Kind of, I was thinking of her, and it's not she's not the most engaged of seniors, and I could imagine that some of what you're working on would be of great benefit to her someday. So to all of the people who are watching and whatnot, if you've got questions for Mark, we'll take the next 10 minutes or so and pose some of these to him. So there's a Q&A box at the bottom that you can type them in, and there are a couple of questions. But I want to start just with something that occurred to me as I was watching, and this regarding the To Race With Me product, and that's I was reminded of Peloton, the company that sends bicycles. You buy a bicycle and then you effectively are connected to a social network that leads you to do exercise. And I'm not a member, but I've thought of being one. And I thought to myself, that's kind of what you're doing for seniors, aren't you? I mean, you're connecting them to others to try to get them to work out.
Yes, I never started from the Peloton place. Probably what motivated me more was a project called Moditech, where people would have this large immersive kind of hemisphere, and they'd be pedaling through childhood scenes. So these people would create scenes from their childhood, like in Norway or something, and then they'd be pedaling. So that was a reminiscence-based type of exercise. But the difference with Peloton is that it's not really designed for seniors, obviously. So we can't expect seniors to perch on top of a stationary bicycle. And we don't necessarily want to have a trainer telling them to work harder. So there's a different. So I think you have to design based on the requirements from the ground up. And while there's some inspiration from things like Moditech and Peloton, ultimately we have to be driven by what we see in terms of the user requirements. Oh,
and I just to be clear, I don't see my mom kind of doing a Peloton, but we Zoom with her. We've Zoomed with her for 18 months, and she gets a lot out of that. And I could imagine finding a way to get her onto some form of exercise, and it's going to really having people she knows or having some connection to somebody she recognizes, kind of to drive that is that would be huge in terms of encouraging her to get some exercise. So I think this is very cool. So let me a couple of comments or a couple of questions now in the Q&A. One is actually a comment, and I'll just read it for you. Is from David Paris. And David wrote, regarding the motivation slide, he wrote, try playing Monopoly with real money, where perhaps you divide the Monopoly dollar bills by 100. money is a huge motivator, even when the winner has to return the funds at the end, right? It's and I can imagine that's true.
Yes, I'll just give a quick story there. We were in Edmonton and we took our unit out to a long-term care home. This is one with the whack-a-mole game and the coin dispenser. And we had a gentleman there who had vascular problems. And he was in the long-term care home because basically he would gamble his money away otherwise. And he had been a smart guy. I forget, a high school teacher or high school principal at several schools. His son was an IT consultant, but he was in this situation where he was there. And he started playing the game, and every time he got a coin, he'd put it in his pocket. And pretty soon he figured out that we had a jar of coins there. So he just grabbed all the coins in the jar and put them in his pocket. So for that guy, you know, the people in the home were kind of like sort of really embarrassed. But I thought it was a wonderful demonstration of just what David is saying, that how people are motivated to have money, and even if it's small amounts of money.
And especially seniors who have lived a lifetime saving it in many cases. So Alan Fong has asked a question regarding To Race With Me. He asks, are the social interactions initiated by the users, or could they be by the users or by the family members? And if it's the users, is there a learning curve to doing that?
Yeah, so our model is that the residents or users don't do the initiation. What happens is it's a kind of opt-out model. So if they start peddling, then we have a list of people that they should be willing to communicate with, like family members and so on. And then we send out the notifications to one or more of those people. And if anybody responds and says, hey, I'm ready, I click a button, I want to start a call, then what happens is there's a message pops up on the screen saying, hit a button if you don't want to accept this call. And after 7 seconds, if they don't opt out, then the call starts. So basically, we're trying to facilitate social interaction and make it frictionless. So that's the model we've come up with.
So our colleague and Professor Emeritus Paul Milgram wrote great talk, Mark, but he wants to know if you have thought yet or have worried about liability issues. If people using your system are doing that on their own, unsupervised, is there a problem of people perhaps pushing themselves too hard with potentially tragic results?
Yeah, so I mean, there are tragic results in long-term care every day. You know, I've seen people go out with a dignity blanket, you know, when I visited. So I know how frequent these things can be. I would say that you know, the studies we're doing at the moment are low risk because we generally have medical advice and people are screened. So the inclusion criteria are that people are fit and there's no known risks. So if someone chooses to have a heart attack on our equipment, presumably it would have happened anyway, or you know. In the long term, I think, Paul, your question is a very good one for aging in place settings. But I suppose it's the same for Peloton, really. I mean, you've got risks. At some point, you probably just have to earn enough money that you can hire some high-priced lawyers to deal with these kinds of situations, and just design your equipment so it doesn't make, you know, overstrain. So they just can't pedal that fast, for instance.
Right. Just Sima Yagubian, who is a former PhD student of ours in MIE, has posted a question and asked about the early detection of dementia. In other words, at some point, one knows that someone is suffering from dementia and can use these tests to perhaps assess the extent of it. But is it possible to use the tests to perhaps predict or discover early onset dementia?
Yeah, I believe it is. Right now, there are people doing machine learning on voice patterns. You know, there's a company called Winterlight Labs that does that kind of stuff, looking for, you know, detection of dementia. But I think also it should be possible to detect mild cognitive impairment. I think what you have to do is have longitudinal testing over a period of time. So you look for changes and you look for the slope, right? That really is my hope, that we will do this kind of detection. One more thing I'll say is I'll put in a plug for the glymphatic system. So there's a system in the brain called the glymphatic system that removes misfolded proteins while we sleep, and it's a certain stage of sleep. And for a long time, people were wondering why people with a lot of sleep disturbance had a higher risk of dementia. And now it looks like, you know, we're just getting more stuff piled up and the garbage trucks are not coming through our brains as frequently as they should be. So, you know, people have been looking at tangles and plaques in the brain as an indicator of, you know, dementia or dementia risk. But I think it's more a matter of problems with waste disposal. And it's not a side effect of a disease. It's really just a sort of a biological process and the machine breaking down.
So I see two other questions, and I will say to everybody listening, maybe I'll limit limit us to just these last two, but I do want to ask Mark these, and then I'm going to invite Shannon in to just wrap this up. But so our friend Jim Peers, a an alumnus of industrial engineering from a few years ago and a good friend of MIE, Jim asked, are there other schools or companies focused on these products? And if so, how far along are they?
Yeah, so there's a company called Ambient Activity Technologies based in Midland that I know of and I work with, and they have products. They have a product called Abby that is on the wall. It charged about $8,000 for it, and it's for late stage dementia. And you can do things like pet a cat, and if you pet the cat, then you see cat videos or baby videos and so on. So it's kind of nice, and people like it. They're also producing a communication product called Genie, which is kind of similar to sort of stuff we'll be doing, because I guess it's similar because we helped them design their thing. And I think there are many other companies getting into aging technology. There's companies, as you know, like Lumosity, which are trying to do brain training. So I would say Jim, it's a very crowded field, but at the same time, I don't feel like a lot of people are doing good solutions for exercise, and they generally don't tie in social interaction like we're trying to do. And obviously that could change in 5 seconds, so I suspect we're in a very competitive environment.
Sure. And maybe just the last question I'll pose to you is from Paul Lupinacci, who just asked, is demotivation an issue when someone's performance degrades over time?
That's a really good question. It depends on the person. I think some people who lose performance, they try harder. Other people, if they can't be at their peak performance, they get upset and they walk away. I mean, I think it's like if you're a concert pianist, do you keep practicing as you get older, or do you get frustrated and stop because you can no longer play at the same level? I think that's a personality characteristic myself.
Yeah. So listen, there is one last question in here, and I think a student or perhaps prospective student has asked, Mark, how can I get involved as a student with your Centivizer work?
Okay, so if you come in with a set of identifiable skills that we need, then we can talk, right? Because I at this stage I am totally committed to this project, and we need everybody working on the project to be the best we can get. That's kind of where we are.
So on behalf of everyone listening, Mark, I think this was just a fascinating presentation on really important work. So thank you for that. And to all of you listening, if you have a few more minutes and would like to join us in a little online networking session, some of us are heading off to an app called GatherTown, and I'm going to invite Shannon Osborne, who works for the Department of MIE, to just tell you briefly how to get there and what to do when you get there. Shannon?
Hi, everyone. So we've just posted in the chat right now the link to GatherTown. GatherTown is a virtual platform where you go on as a little avatar and you can move your person around using the up, down, side to side arrow keys. And so we can continue chatting over there one-on-one. You can say hello to Professor Bussman and Professor Chignell, or just chat with some fellow alumni and say hello to everybody. In GatherTown, you can use camera and mic, so actually we can chat face to face. And we're looking forward to connecting with anybody who has a few minutes to come over. Okay.
So with that, we'll see you over there. And again, to all of you listening, thank you for joining us. And to Mark, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
And thank you, Marcus and Shannon, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go over to GatherTown now.